Good day everyone. This is presentation and discussion of Group 4 about the corporate level strategies prepared by Vince Alfred Sena, Kalamnik J. Del Mundo, and Kimari Magkarang. This will be the coverage of this presentation, and in this topic, first we will be discuss about the corporate strategy. Next is one of the approach of corporate strategy, which is the portfolio approach. Next is the corporate strategy and adding value, and the second approach is the core competence approach. You will also learn the creating and sustaining the multi-business advantage, and last we will be discuss the corporate level strategy in the international perspective. Corporate strategy. Corporate strategy is a firm's overall approach to gaining a competitive advantage by operating in several businesses simultaneously. This strategy is applicable to the company that wanted to expand their business overseas. So gaining a competitive advantage requires setting a clear purpose for the entire organization and identifying plans and actions on how to achieve that purpose. So the purpose become when when the company decided to expand overseas, so the purpose become a broader concept that include properties, international customers, employees outside of the domestic boundaries. Developing a competitive corporate strategy requires flexibility in terms of being able to reallocate resources quickly and smoothly among different business units in response to changing market conditions. So market is dynamic. So the corporate strategy must flexible that can be able to adapt easily the resources and different changing market conditions. So in order to be able to respond to the dynamism in the business environment and enhance competitiveness, organizations should develop flexible corporate strategies and identify effective means in order to achieve this flexibility. The portfolio approach. This is the first corporate strategy employed by the large hospitality and tourism organizations. In today's world, the majority of H&T organizations offer more than only one product or service, and many serve more than one customer group. The strategic reason for this is relying solely on the one activity would expose the organization to the risk of a potential downturn in an area of operation. So focusing only on one product can be the cause of loss. So corporate strategy is concerned with decisions about issues such as how much of our time and money we should spend in our best products and best units in order to ensure their continued success, and how much time and money they should spend in developing new products, and because innovation of products is one of a competitive advantage of a business in order to introduce new in a market. So one of the most popular aids to the developing a corporate strategy that addresses the preceding issues in the multi-business of H&T organization is the portfolio analysis. Portfolio analysis puts the corporate headquarters in the role of an internal auditor. In portfolio analysis, top management views its product lines and business units as a series of investments that will have a return. So in this approach, top management viewing their product and the business units. So these products and their business units will serve as a series of their investment, and when there is investment, they are expecting to have a return. So the product lines and businesses units form a portfolio of investments that the top management constantly assesses to ensure the maximum return on the invested money. So two of the most popular portfolio approaches are Boston Consulting Group Matrix or BCG Matrix and the Directional Policy Matrix or GE McKenzie. Boston Consulting Group or BCG matrix. It is the simplest way to portray an organization's portfolio of investments. Each of an organization's product lines or business units is plotted on the matrix according to the both of the growth rate of the industry in which it competes and its relative market share. So a unit's relative competitive position or market share is defined as its market share in the industry divided by that of the largest other competitor. So market growth rate is important because markets that are growing rapidly offer more opportunities for sale than markets with lower growth rates. So the more the company's market growing, the more the opportunities in generating sale for them. The BCG growth share matrix suggests that as a product moves through its life cycle, it is categorized into one of the four types for the purpose of funding decision. First is a star. The upper left quadrant represents those products or business units with a high market shares operating in high growth markets. So they have a high market shares, so it assumes that these products will have economies of scale and be able to generate large amount of cash. So they are investing heavily to keep up with growth. Next is cash cows. The lower left quadrant shows business units or products with a high market share in a low growth markets. So it is assumed that lower levels of investment will be required. So high market share means that the business unit should be profitable, typically bring in a far more money than is needed to maintain their market share. Next is marks, sometimes called problem children or wildcats. These are the new products with the potential for success but that require much effort and resources for development. So the market growth means that it's likely that considerable investment will still be required, and low market share will mean that such business units or products will have difficulty generating in substantial cash. So market growth is considerable for investment, and low market may be means of difficult in generating cash. So dogs, these products or units have low market share, and since they are in unattractive industry, they do not have the potential to bring much cash. So dogs should be either sold off or managed carefully for the small amount of cash they can generate. The directional policy matrix or GE Mackenzie is another way to consider a portfolio of business. Originally developed by Mackenzie and Corporation consultants, this matrix categorizes business units or products into those with good prospects and those with poorer prospects. So specifically, it positions business units or products according to first is how attract the relevant market is in which they are operating, and next is the competitive strength of strategic business units in that market. In contrast to the BCG matrix, it includes much more data in two key factors than just business growth rate and market share.
Corporate strategy and adding value. These are the large organizations that operate in highly dynamic and competitive markets face different types of pressure according to Connolly, Heath, Denisi, and Ireland 2007. First is pressure to reduce cost, pressure to increase revenue, pressure to increase market share, pressure to be responsive to the markets in which they operate, pressure to innovative and stay relevant, pressure to satisfy shareholders and stakeholders, and pressure to transfer information, knowledge, and competencies among business units and functional areas. In order to respond to some of these pressures, Large hospitality and tourism organizations need to pursue a low-cost strategy at a convenient location where they can benefit from economics of scale. Large hospitality and tourism organizations may also need to adapt their product and service offerings to the conditions of local markets in order to be able to accommodate the differences between markets. Being able to strike a balance between these competing demands can be seen as a competitive advantage that adds value to the organization's portfolio. The intent is to create and maintain synergy among all business units and functional areas so the whole organization can collectively work together to achieve the corporate goals. Goschel and Barley 1990 presented a frequently used typology to describe the multinational corporate strategy that encompasses the preceding competing demands. They are identified four main strategies for the multinational corporations. They are international, multi-domestic, global, and transnational. This table shows the four main strategies for the multinational corporations and their specifications. First is the international strategy. It creates value through the transfer of core competencies and resources from home to host country markets. An organization pursuing an international strategy adopts a decentralized approach to the management of its resources and capabilities outside the core to subsidiaries. In terms of product offerings and marketing, the local networks and competences are exploited, but there is limited adaptation to the local markets. It is appropriate in those markets where, although there is a need for local responsiveness if it is not urgent. Next is a multi-domestic strategy. It strives to achieve maximum local responsiveness. Products and services are designed and developed according to the preferences of local customers. The cost of operations according to the expectations could be high. As multi-domestic strategy requires leveraging local resources and competencies in each market. Business units are fully responsible and accountable for strategic and operating decisions, as they operate autonomously. A global strategy tends to centralize strategic and operating decisions at the corporate level. This strategy also involves standardizing products and services as well as marketing activities in order to benefit from economies of scale. Its strengths are efficiencies of scale and cost advantages. It is appropriate when there is a need for cost reduction and demand for local adaptation is low. In the organizations where global strategy is pursued, there is a high degree of cooperation, resource and competence sharing at the corporate level and learning from the center. Lastly is the transnational strategy. It aims to strike a balance between lowering cost on one hand and being responsive to local demands on the other. Any organization pursuing this strategy, however, must reconcile conflict clause. It is the demand for low cost, which requires global coordination, and the demand for local responsiveness, which requires flexibility and local control. This organizational form has undoubtedly been held up as the possibly the ideal organizational structural form. The core competence approach. Core competencies are valuable, rare, inimitable, non-substitutable resources of an organization that give them a competitive edge in the market. The embedded skills, processes, shadow organizational systems, and culture of an organization that give rise to the next generation of competitive products are examples of core competencies. These are the three tests that can be applied to identify core competencies in a large hospitality and tourism organization. First is it is a core competence provides potential access to a wide variety of markets. It explains that it provides a strong foundation from which the business or the organization will deliver value to customers and stakeholders, seize new opportunities, and grow. Next is a core competence should make a significant contribution to the perceived customer benefits. Lastly it is a core competence should be difficult for competitors to imitate. It helps the organization to be apart from its peers and help create a sustained competitive advantage in the industry.
Creating and sustaining the multi-business advantage. Many different views exist on how organizations can create and maintain a competitive advantage. For example, the Porter's 5 Forces Industry Structure Analysis Framework and his generic business strategy, which is the cost leadership. It's giving customers with the cheapest product, or differentiation, or giving the customers unique products or services, and focus. They are often used to analyze each company's competitive advantage. In some cases, these approaches can be used to analyze each brand's competitive advantage under a corporation. So it is just assumed that by looking at the competition and competitive strategies in industry, the threat of a new entrant, so yung mga bagong develop or new arising business in the same market, and substitutes, and the bargaining power of buyers and suppliers, companies can assess their relative position in the market. So knowing what their positions in the particular market, they can identify their competitive advantage and may choose to follow one of the generic business strategies of Porter's, which is the cost leadership, differentiations, or focus in order to gain a competitive advantage. Research-based view is proposed as an alternative view to analyze the competitive advantage of firms by Barney and Hesterly of 2008. Unlike Porter's positioning view, the research-based view suggests that a competitive advantage comes from a firm's unique resources. So these resources must be valuable, rare, it is not easy to find, inimitable, it is not can be easily to imitate, and non-substitutable or cannot be substituted by any alternatives. So these resources possessed both by the corporation and business units, and the corporation should be organized in a way that it can effectively and efficiently exploit these resources, using resources efficiently. So due to globalization and rapid economic, technological, and sociocultural changes, so organization needs to be innovative. So they need to find a new products that will be produced by the resources, adaptable, quick, and efficient when using their resources and abilities. Knowledge, experience, and the dedication of employees and managers of different business units are often accepted important factors in creating and developing unique resources and competencies. Porter proposed an action program for those organizations with multi-business units to address these issues. First is an organization should begin to develop a corporate strategy by identifying an existing portfolio of business units, and in order to find ways to enhance the competitive advantage of existing units, so applying the portfolio approach. Next is it should then select the core businesses, or the core competence approach will be undergo here. that will be foundation of the corporate strategy. So core businesses are those that are in an attractive industry and have the potential to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage and also have important interrelationships with the other business units. Next is it should create horizontal organizational mechanism to facilitate relationships among the core businesses. Top management can facilitate relationship by emphasizing cross-unit collaboration, grouping units organizationally, modifying incentives, and taking steps to build a strong sense of corporate identity. Corporate level strategy in the international perspective. The scope of international strategy is a large and involves not only international organizations but also different nations. So some argue that international strategy is a function of competitive advantage of multinational operations. So while reinforcing their competitive advantage or counterbalancing their competitive weakness in the international environment, organizations need to consider two central questions. First is, to what extent are customer needs homogeneous worldwide? And can we meet their needs through a standardized one-size-fits-all approach? So we need to be aware that differences exist among different country markets and consumers in terms of their cultures, values, and styles. So your international strategy should encompass and respond to these differences. Having recognized the importance of establishing effective mechanisms to coordinate and integrate strategies across national marks, Porter identified two types of strategies that organizations can follow internationally: the multi-domestic and global strategies. So he defined that multi-domestic strategies as a country-centered strategy there are multiple strategies based on a certain country. So an organization exploiting multi-domestic strategies will pursue separate strategies in each of its foreign markets. So the headquarters of multi-domestic company will be responsible for financial and marketing policies and practices, but it will be decentralized business strategies and operations. So in terms of global strategies, he indicates that an organization that is exploiting global strategies will see its competitive position in one country as a significantly influenced by its position in the other country. So organization must integrate its activity on a worldwide basis to capture the linkage among the countries. So the strategy is centralized, but operations may be centralized or decentralized depending on economies and effectiveness. Perlmutter identified four approaches to international strategy. First is the ethnocentric or home country oriented. It is a strategy treats foreign market as an extension of the domestic market. So in ethnocentric strategy, decision making is centralized in headquarters. So home country standards are applied to evaluate and control the performance of the organization. So in this strategy, people in the home country are developed for key positions everywhere in the world. So next is the polycentric or host country oriented. So in contrast, a polycentric strategy would acknowledge that there are differences between domestic markets and the other markets. So the strategy would have been designed to maximize local responsiveness. So this strategy would have been a decentralized decision-making structure and more authority to the subsidiaries. So there will be minimal orders and advice to or from headquarters, and people of local nationality are developed for key positions in their own country. So next is the geocentric or regionally oriented. So Region-centric strategy views region as a potential market, ignoring national boundaries. The organization develops strategies and organizes activities on a regional basis. So decision making is centralized in regional headquarters and there is a high collaboration among subsidiaries. Regional people are developed for key positions anywhere in the region. Next is geocentric strategy. It involves collaboration of headquarters and subsidiaries around the world. The standards identified to measure and control performance are universal and local. The best qualified people everywhere in the world are developed for key positions everywhere in the world. And also, geocentric strategy recognizes that there are global similarities in both cultures and market. That's all, and thank you po.